main topics. We'll go into the Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, which has been announced just recently. We'll be talking about the Warhammer Fantasy RPG 4th edition and how that's coming out real soon, then jumping into a brief little foray into Warhammer 40,000 and its kind of upcoming releases, and then coming out at the end of this video talking about the brand new DLC Queen of the Crone coming out for Total War Warhammer 2. So since we're in High Elf week, or High Elf episode, whatever I'm going to say, Sotek, what are your thoughts on Eltharion? Now, Eltharion, is my favorite lord. He's had 3 iterations throughout the lore, and that I want him to be added in Total War Warhammer. But what are your thoughts on him?
So Eltharion the Grim is probably, in my opinion, he's the thing I like about him is that he's kind of the epitome of what it means to be a high elf. Mm-hmm. His saga of being someone that was essentially really a bit arrogant and brash when he did his invasion of Nagaroth, which of course ended up not going so well for him when he got shanked by a witch elf and poisoned. But then his whole redemption arc of when he came home to find, Grom the Paunch had basically burned and looted the place. And the thing I like so much about him, though, was that he epitomizes that he, resisted all this suffering while trying to do the right thing for his own kind of personal ambition. And when Grom the Paunch's shaman screwed up the Waystone and was threatening to basically explode Ulthuan, or if not just the entire world, with how badly he screwed things up. Eltharion the Grim went in there with 2 or 3 friends, and he was the only one who came out. And they call him Eltharion the Grim after that, because obviously he was of such a grim disposition, because what he saw in there basically scarred him, and he won't talk about it. There's even an excellent short story featuring Eltharion about a actor who does a play that kind of tells the story revolving around the Grom the Paunch incident. Ooh. And he tells this very, very famous high elf entertainer, it's like an epic or a story, a bard, and he goes to tell this story. Sounds and Eltharion the Grim actually goes into the city and contemplates assassinating him, because he hates the story so much, and it reminds him of it, and he hates thinking about it. He was so disturbed by what he faced in there. And it's this really interesting story where you're kind of following Eltharion around and how he's contemplating this terrible deed, and he finally comes face to face with the entertainer, and the entertainer is more than they seem. Jesus. It's kind of like a night where they're celebrating certain aspects of high elf history and of course the gods and stuff like that. And Eltharion ends up having this really interesting revelation when talking to this man that kind of allows him to let go a little bit and relax. Mm-hmm. And you end up in the short story learning about the play, and it goes through, and Eltharion lets him live. And it's a really interesting view into how he's kind of like a Lithanar in that he's a very dark side of the high elf spectrum.
Oh yeah, totally.
But instead of being twisted by hatred by what the Dark Elves did and by what was taken from him, he was more tainted by seeing what lies beyond the veil and seeing what will happen should the world fail, should the High Elves fail. And he takes everything incredibly seriously. But at the same time, unlike a Lithanar, he's not obsessively a jerk, or I wouldn't call Lithanar a jerk, but he's not obsessed with a mission. He still, he still isn't active in politics and shows up publicly and forges alliances and is very good friends with Tyrion, and is an excellent character. I can understand why a lot of people love him, of course. And, on top of that being a really fun balance of a melee casting character, there's a lot of phenomenal things to like about him. That was a bit long-winded, of course, but those are my thoughts on Eltharion. I like him a lot. He's not my favorite high elf character, I'll say, because he always was kind of a weird middle ground in that, he had a monstrous mount, but he wasn't the best monstrous mount. That was Emmerich with his dragon. He wasn't the best fighter. That was Tyrion. He wasn't the best wizard. That was Teclis. So he's kind of this really weird middle ground, but I can see why that appeals to a lot of people.
You know what? When I played the tabletop too, I didn't make an elf. I didn't play with Eltharion, but I made an Eltharion lord. I made a guy Arnold Griffin, and I decked him out pretty much to the nines. So
Did you give him the wizard hat?
No, didn't give him the wizard hat. You gave him the wizard hat. But like, I liked Eltharion. Like you said, though, his model wasn't up to date. They never updated his model, and he's one of the original. He's one of the OG high elf characters. Like, I mean, I've got my 3rd edition book where he's in it. And I'm like, oh man, and it's like, it's interesting too, because it's like you said, like, he's seen beyond the veil, and it makes me wonder, did they completely forget why they called him the Grim? And then when the end times, when Ark in the Black just like touches him and makes him disintegrate, did he know that was going to happen? Like, it kind of makes this cool romantic notion of maybe he charged into this moment to try to save it's not Ilariel, Aliathra. Yeah, trying to save Aliathra, and like knowing that this would be the second that Arkin grabs him and kills him. Like, is that something that he knew?
Certainly, yeah. He has that kind of Phoenix Guard vibe to him,
right?
Of someone that knows things that they're too heavy a burden to know,
right?
It's certainly possible. His death was very tragic. I mean, granted, Nagash was easily the best written book at the end times, and that, especially the first arc, was very well written.
Dude, I read that part. I slapped the book shut in anger.
Oh, but the artwork was so beautiful for that part of the book too. When you had Nagash exploding out, and all the high elves are fighting that last desperate battle. Oh, that was so sad. It's one of
the very few artworks where you see high elves and vampire accounts together on a page. Like, it's very rare.
They're rare together.
And
vampire counts kind of are more of like an old world terror, and the high elves, very rarely leave Ulthuan, especially for artworks.
Yeah.
For high elves, it's usually, when you're dealing with high elves, it's usually greenskins, dark elves, or chaos.
Right. It's too true.
Occasionally, and then of course we got some little Skaven in there when 8th edition rolled around. But
yes.
If you're ready, I think we're set with our high elf bit for the day, so I think it's time for us to move on to the next subject.
Yeah, and I think probably a subject that you're most excited for, because you've been pretty embroiled in Age of Sigmar, right?
I have, especially in probably the last, I'd say, 4 to 6 months. I was like many Warhammer Fantasy people that when it initially came out, I wasn't interested in it. I wanted nothing to do with it. It destroyed my favorite fantasy universe. But now that it's been out for, I think, a little over 2 years, it's kind of really started to develop into its own game, and the game itself is very fun to play, and the lore has also started to improve significantly.
I've heard.
I don't think anyone who has seen the Daughters of Cain or the Ideneth Deepkin book can really look at Age of Sigmar and be like, "Oh, this is just garbage." Like, there's some pretty redeemable nuggets in there. I mean, sure, there are, things like the Stormcast, which is very popular, but, if you're coming from a Warhammer Fantasy background, Stormcasts are kind of a difficult pill to swallow. But the thing we're really focusing on today is that they've announced the 2nd edition for Age of Sigmar, which, quite frankly, it wasn't even known that they were going to do a 2nd edition.
Seriously, I thought there was just going to be perpetual updates to the War Scrolls.
Yeah, which, when you say it out loud, you realize, oh, of course they're going to do additions. That's just what Games Workshop does. Right. But Age of Sigmar has been out for 2 years, and and they didn't call it 1st edition. It was just
Age of Sigmar.
Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
But they have officially confirmed that in June we're getting a brand new Age of Sigmar, and it's basically kind of turning back into Warhammer Fantasy in the sense of that. It's the rules are going to be much more complicated. They're no longer going to be just 4 pages. They're taking all the rules out of the FAQs and adding them to the new rule book. All the battle tomes are getting updated with like new rules and snippets. I've already seen confirmations of like exclusive items for the different battle tomes and like different spells and lores. They've of course announced the new starter set, which is Stormcast, of course, but a new type of Stormcast, but versus the Night Haunts, which the Night Haunts are a very exciting faction of it's just pure ethereal spirits.
Right, it's just wraiths for the most part, right?
Yeah, it's pure wraiths. There's nothing but ghosts.
I like
and
that.
they are gorgeous looking. They're all sorts of creepy ghosts who died in various ways, and depending on how they died, they've all. But the thing that drives them together is that they've all come back for vengeance.
Yeah, they're
But all
spooky,
of them,
scary.
yeah, but all of them died in different ways. So the way that Nagash resurrected them as Night Haunts is dependent on how they died. So there's a lot of really cool, like there's one who's an executioner, and like his whole thing is that he's got like a gibbet hanging from his back with a hangman's noose around his neck, and he like wields part of it as a weapon. Or there's these really creepy looking guys that have like deer skulls, and their whole thing is that they hunted people. And so now they are transformed to look like a prey animal. So they have like deer skulls, but they carry big size. And it's a very cool faction.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at them. Oh man, they're fucking cool.
Yeah, and basically the rules are just changing dramatically. It's going to be a whole new game. You know, they're making the shooting system less abusive. They're adding in these things called persistent spells. So you know, when you if you played Warhammer Fantasy, or if you played Total War Warhammer, when you'd use like Purple Sun of Xeris, right?
Right.
And you'd see, you know, you summon the vortex and it does a little thing and vanish. Well, now they're introducing this new thing called permanent spells. And what these do are they're these terrifying spells you summon on the battlefield, and they have actual models.
And the models are pretty huge and cool. Like the Purple Sun of
they're
Xerius was
very
cool. The Flaming
and,
Skull was rad
and like
looking.
one of them is the Purple Sun of Xerius, and it looks awesome. It's this giant purple skull that has a bunch of spikes coming out of it, and it looks really dangerous.
Oh, man.
And like they've revealed the greenskin one, which is this giant mouth full of teeth that just plows through people.
Like, and say what you will. I mean, say what you will. There is obviously going to be the naysayer portion of the Games Workshop bitter, jaded fan base that would say, you know, this is just another way for Games Workshop to get money out of us. And I'll be honest with you, yeah, it probably is. But at the same time, I'm very excited for it, because if you don't want to do it, no one is gonna tell you, hey, you can't use a stand-in for that, because you're playing for the most part at, you know, your local game stores or with friends. Unless you're serious about tournaments, then that isn't a factor in your mind. Then you don't need to buy the model for it. But I think it adds a really good way to bring flavor and make the board kind of come to life. And I think that's what they've done a lot with Age of Sigmar. And as much as I kind of like look down the nose of Age of Sigmar, I'm starting to look less and less down the nose, because I know that the lore is evolving. And Aaron Dembski-Bowden, like my favorite author of all things Warhammer, has pretty much like given Age of Sigmar the stamp, because he said the same thing. I was reading his AMA on Reddit, and he was saying, man, I did not like Age of Sigmar, and I felt betrayed. I felt like I was going through a breakup. You know, this lore that I had gotten into so deeply, even before Warhammer 40,000, was just completely capsized in one night, it felt like. And I begrudgingly didn't look at Age of Sigmar. Is pretty much what he was saying, until he finally kind of got into some meetings, because he is a member of the Black Library, so he's privy to a lot of the really cool meetings. They talk about the lore and stuff like that. And he was basically saying, like, you know what? I was mad because the lore is going to be good. The lore is finally going to flesh itself out. We're going to start to get better things coming our way. And I've always kind of like stood by the notion that Age of Sigmar is that kind of huge Band-Aid ripoff. Let's scrap it from the ground up and rebuild the game. And we'll just get this out of the way right now. A, copyrightable names, and B, a system that works a little bit better. I mean, they're starting to add stuff in. I mean, they're bringing in command points. And I don't know if command points were already in the game, but command points are in 40K. They're bringing back.
Yeah, they're new. They're new to Age of Sigmar.
Okay, so they're adding command points into Age of Sigmar. They're bringing back Look Out, Sir, which was in 8th edition. Was it not in Age of Sigmar Vanilla?
No. Yep, wasn't in before. You could just snipe characters. Now there's penalties to doing that.
And I mean, Slaanesh is coming back, so that's
cool. Hopefully Italian will put up a piece of artwork in the video that they did that shows Slaanesh in his current form, and it's pretty epic looking. I'm not gonna lie.
It is disgusting. It is amazing, and it's just like the world is starting to evolve. And the one thing I am very hesitant around is the Sigmarines and Games Workshop's kind of latch onto the Space Marine image. I think it's my favorite image in all things fantasy. I'm not gonna lie, or all things sci-fi. If I could, I'd become a Space Marine. Some of my viewers think I am one. That's fucking awesome as shit. But my point is, like, you look at the Ultramarines or the Space Marines Codex, and it's like 548 pages. It's not that many. It's like 300 or 200 or whatever. But you look at any other codex in Warhammer 40,000, and it is half, if not a quarter of that size. Don't even get me started on something like just like the World Eater Scar, not the World, the Carnate Demonkin. Like, it's small. It almost should be like a supplement. But then you look at the Stormcast Eternals, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more and more and more models. And I don't want them to suffer from Codex bloat, because if they suffer from Codex bloat, then you've got
might be too late for that.
Yeah, see, and that's what I've already starting to notice is that now they're going to have Stormcast Eternals that are casters, that are like super big deal mages.
Now, I will say that I do think this is the last one for a while. The Sacrosanct Chamber. Because for anyone that doesn't know, the deal with the Stormcast is basically, imagine you're in a room that has a bunch of closed doors. Like, you're in a circular room and there's just a bunch of doors.
Is this a logic question?
No, but it might sound like one. Now, when Age of Sigmar released, they just had the Stormcast Eternals. One of those doors was opened, and that was the Stormcast Eternals. That was their chamber. But then something happened in the Age of Sigmar world, and Sigmar responded by saying, "Okay, open this door." And so they opened this door, and it was the Vanguard chamber that had all like the shooty guys and the really fast cav kind of guys who ride on these crazy looking bird raptor things. And then they were like, "Okay, open the extremist chamber, which had all the guys riding on dragons and all this other stuff." And so basically, it's this room where they keep opening doors, where it's not like the faction getting a new book. It's just like it's basically a new Space Marine chapter. That's the easiest way to think about it.
Okay.
Each of these different Stormcast Eternal books is a new Space Marine chapter. But instead of them, like, you buying your Space Marine chapter book, like, you buy your Blood Angels book and like you just play Blood Angels, you can do that with Stormcast Eternals. But generally what you do is you buy the big book or the book with all of them, and you combine them how you want, which does make them a bit heavy-handed right now.
Okay.
But we're hoping this year to get one of the most anticipated races for Age of Sigmar is, of course, the Free Guild, which is just the common man, the Empire, Bretonia, like their descendants, is what we're hoping to get this year.
Just good old chaps.
Yeah, I will say second edition is looking very promising. We will definitely be talking about it on the next podcast because there will be a lot more news out then. But it's time for us to move on.
Okay.
So, hopping into a much shorter thing, but something we're talking about, is that the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition is very close to release.
Ooh.
It actually releases next month. So from the time we'll be putting this video out, 5-6 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't know the exact date yet, but they've brought back old school artwork, funny enough, for the pre-orders. Either that or the pre-order artwork hasn't updated, but you can pre-order it on numerous websites if you just Google it. It's pretty simple. It's being manufactured by Cubicle 7, I believe is the company behind it.
Yes.
And essentially, from what we've been told and what the rumor mill says, is that Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition is going to be much more like 2nd edition than 3rd edition, which means very, very in-depth lore, very, very in-depth rules with a success-fail system that might have degrees. But one of the more exciting things is that it's been the rumor mill has been very heavily stating that Games Workshop is using the Fantasy Roleplay Edition as a way to expand the lore on parts of the Warhammer universe that Games Workshop did not. So supposedly the very first, I don't know if it's the first expansion or the initial release itself, but supposedly one of the earliest releases we're supposed to get for the new roleplay game is a complete campaign series fleshing out and allowing players to build their own campaigns in the Far East, like End, Cathay, Nippon, and the Kingdoms of Koresh, which, if it's true, would be huge.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Because, I mean, we always hear, like, murmurs of them throughout everything, but no like actual fleshing out of them outside of like we know they're thematically what they're like. I mean, I ran a couple games of second edition fantasy roleplay, and I've read a bunch of stuff from the third edition. I never played it, but it's exciting to hear that fourth edition will play like second edition, because second edition was brutal. Second edition was not forgiving.
That's true. Not as bad as Dark Heresy, but pretty bad.
Which I was actually just about to bring up, because I've run games of Dark Heresy and the other one that's Space Marines, Deathwatch.
Yeah, which supposedly those are being looked at for future revival as well.
Goody, because
but I think they're going to wait till after. So for anyone that's curious about role playing games from Games Workshop, so in June you'll be able to buy the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay online and pre-order the physical edition. The physical edition doesn't come out until July.
Oh.
So I'm probably going to buy both because I'm, terrible and have no self-control. So
do you need self-control when it comes to any Games Workshop anything?
You do when you don't make millions of dollars. So they're doing fantasy first, and then they've already announced that there's going to be an Age of Sigmar roleplay that's going to be the same level of detail and focus, but on the 8 realms of Age of Sigmar instead, allowing you to play in that universe. And then supposedly, if those do well, and like the interest is as revitalized as like Blood Bowl has been, and Shadespire and all those other games which have been doing very well, then we're almost certainly going to see a return to the 40K ones as well, as a no-brainer. Like Games Workshop loves making money.
Yeah,
if it's going to make the money, they're going to do it in a heartbeat. But I will say right now on this podcast that as soon as I get my hands on the 4th edition online book, the day it comes out, I'm going to read through it. I'm probably going to put out we'll probably do a video talking about, thoughts and reactions and stuff. And then I'm going to just do my damnedest to throw together a campaign that's going to take like 5 to 8 hours to play through. Get together like 4 YouTubers, like Italian, probably, maybe.
Yes, my answer is yes.
And maybe Turin and Anna and somebody else, and or whoever y'all would like to see, and just run through a campaign just to show off the new system. But that's pretty much all we have for that. It's not a lot of despite the fact we're like weeks away from release at longest. It's still very hush hush.
Yeah, it's very hush. I've heard good things from the people that have touched it, but nothing about the systems or anything like that.
Which anyone curious, the pricing right now is running, I believe it's about $20 to $25 for a starter set.
Yeah, starter set pre-order is $22.49 US.
Yeah, but the actual rule book, so that's a starter edition. So that's like if you've never done a role play before and you just want to get like a little, set of things. The actual rule book right now is being listed at $60.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be fucking huge.
Yeah. Miniaturemarket.com puts it at $44.99 if you want to pre-order it. So for any of you guys fancying that, they also have a collector's edition. It looks like it's leather bound.
Yeah. But just like I would say with video games, I would wait until one of us gets our hands on it and has a chance to review it before buying it yourself to let you know if it's garbage or not, so you don't waste your money.
Yep, like he said.
But with that, let's go ahead and pop into 40K.
Oh, my favorite, because leading into that, you're talking about fantasy, you're talking about RPG. Wrath and Glory, that's the 40K RPG that's coming out later this year that you were referencing, right?
Presumably, yes.
So that'll...
I'm not certain.
Because that, I mean, to talk about what we will talk about with the 40K, that'll kind of get people's beak wet on the what is the emergent Adeptus Sororitas lore and how the Sisters of Battle are kind of coming back to the Warhammer 40,000 universe in late 2018, early 2019, more like early 2019. But that's not the 40K news we want to talk about here today, right?
No, but I think we actually can make time for that in just a minute. We'll just go through what we have first, and then I think we will touch back on that, because that sounds interesting, and I actually don't know a whole lot about what you were just talking about, and I'd like to hear more.
Well,
so the thing we're gonna talk about today, which is just kind of an update, and the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to kind of center Games Workshop news into a spot
right.
where we have it focused and make it a regular thing. So for those of you who don't follow 40K and might have missed, I played a 40K game live on my channel which definitely won't be doing that again on YouTube. Live games will be on Twitch. Recorded videos will be on YouTube because that was a nightmare. Anyway, they have started, I believe, pre-orders for the Harlequins book. Which, for those of you who don't know who the Harlequins are, they're a sub-faction of the Eldar, who are kind of like the elves of Warhammer 40,000. I guess if I had to compare them to a fantasy race, I guess they'd be like the Wood Elves, because they're kind of like halfway between the Dark Eldar and the regular Eldar.
They kind of have their own agenda. You know, I mean, just to segue the releases, I guess, to talk a little bit about their lore, because their lore is pretty important. I mean,
yeah, I'll let you. Why don't you just wax a little bit on their lore here for a moment?
Wax poetic, because the Harlequins have like a really interesting lore. I mean, they are basically, they kind of present themselves as a troupe, like a theater troupe. They've got like Masks is one of the Masque is one of the name of one of their units. Shadow Seers, everything has got these theatrical names, and the Harlequins themselves kind of have this like cosmic guardian role. I mean, they seem like they're just these weird goof offs that have fallen and gone to a different path. And fallen wasn't really the proper word for them, but the Harlequins as a whole, like, they help out in random ways to every race, and they also attack and destroy certain races. So it just kind of depends what you're doing if they're going to be on your side, because basically they essentially fight against, I want to say Slaanesh, but it's like in such a weird way that they just do whatever they can to further the power of Slaanesh, or further the ruinous powers in some way or another. So they'll pop in. They're one of the very few Eldar that use the webway to its fullest, because they haven't fallen from grace. They've always kind of been embroiled in it. It's a really, really kind of crazy lore with them, and they have a really...
their whole thing is they're very slippery, like with Loic being their patron. They're very shadowy and kind of able to get into places they shouldn't be able to. I
kept wanting to say Loki, and I'm like, that is not it. It's I was like,
close.
I was like, it's from Warhammer Fantasy. I mean, Loic is in Warhammer Fantasy.
He's based off of.
Seriously. But I mean, like, they're all sorts of crazy masks, as they're called, is their name of their...
excuse me, it's Shigarath in 40K.
Shake Sonora.
It's Loic is his fantasy brother.
But I mean, like, they're really super thematic. Like, Lady Turin's soon-to-be wife is going to be playing the Harlequins. He plays Death Guard, but like,
Jesus, is she really?
Yeah, they're difficult to paint because they have a lot of checkered patterns on them, which actually is not that hard. You use a pencil and you draw on the pattern, and you paint the opposite colors, and then you come in afterward. But they've got...
that's clever.
Yeah, and that's just like painting text onto anything for like Imperium. You use pencil and you press kind of hard, and then you can pretty much just ink it in at that point. But they have a lot of really cool, like, they've got solitaires and death jesters, players, shadow seers. That's some of the name of their units. So
they're certainly very colorful. They kind of remind me of they're almost kind of like 40K's version of the Bretonia, where, you know, Bretonia had very flashy models that all had crazy patterns and vibrant colors. I kind of feel like the Harlequins are the same way.
Yep. Instead of the lady, they have the laughing god. That's the name of the god you were talking
about. Would you mind talking a little bit more about the... I know we were kind of talking about the 40K RPG, but you mentioned something that I had not heard anything about yet. The Blood and Thunder, or what was it?
Wrath and Glory?
Yeah, that one.
Oh, so Wrath and Glory is like the working title for the 40K RPG that's supposed to be coming out in just later this year in general. There's no set date for that, but I know that's like the kind of, I guess.
Oh, this is the first I've heard of this.
Oh, yeah. There's a bunch of like power tiers and stuff like that. It's going to be a little bit different. They said it's going to be a bit of a deeper dive than, say, Dark Heresy or the, I keep wanting to say Death Watch, I think is the name of the Space Marine one, because you are all, I think, members of Death Watch in it. But it's a little bit different, and it kind of is... It's kind of supposed to take what makes Death Watch great and what makes Dark Heresy great and kind of put them together, because Dark Heresy is extremely unforgiving and hard, and Death Watch is a little bit easier because you're a Space Marine, so it's a lot more forgiving. So Wrath and Glory should be really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. If you GM a campaign, you have to let me know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. I mean,
I have a bad feeling they're not going to let me play as a Tyranid, though.
You never know. You could be just you could be a what's it called? Cult, a gene stealer cult.
Oh, geez. Oh, that could be fun.
Yeah.
But that'll pretty much, I think, wrap us up for 40K. For those of you interested, when we say that you can leave questions for future episodes down below in the comment section or on our Discord channels, which there will be links to, and if you're watching it on Italian's channel or mine, there will be links to those channels where you can find the relevant section. You can ask questions about anything Games Workshop related or covering. Right. Like, I know we kind of have time for it, so I'm going to go into it just a tiny bit, just the tiniest bit.
Do it!
Which is because I know somebody's going to ask about it if we don't talk about it, which is the Warhammer for kids.
I've purposely not clicked on a single goddamn article regarding it. Warhammer Adventures?
Yes, Warhammer Adventures. I'm not going to wax super hard on it because the internet has already slammed Games Workshop over this decision. But for those of you who are interested in just the drama of it, because I think me and Natalia would both agree that it's kind of an absurd.
I'm looking at it as you speak, and it hurts. Attack of the Necron, City of Lifestone. Oh.
So what they did was they essentially took 40K and Age of Sigmar, there's one for each, and they basically were like, what if we made a kid-friendly version? Which, in their view, kid-friendly, they mean like Disney Channel friendly.
Yeah, like,
to my understanding,
it's like Teen Titans.
Yeah, so like there's a young adult teenage main character who's going up against something in their respective universe that, if it was lore accurate, would not only be terrifying, but would be so horribly one-sided against the main character that they would just be utterly annihilated. Like, the 40K ones are girlfriending a Necron, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's like, and it's a rated G version, which just doesn't make sense.
It's Games Workshop has historically tried to target young audiences for a long time. In fact, that was kind of one of the death cries of Warhammer Fantasy, was that, I mean, we'll say what we want about Age of Sigmar in 8th edition. 8th edition, for someone like you and me, and for the majority of people coming from 7th and 6th, is amazing. So 8th edition, I think, was the best the rules have been. Very
hard to come into, though.
Yeah, but exactly, because you have to buy massive armies. You can't just buy small skirmishing sets of armies. The dealing with a regiment, like a regiment that has to be in rank and file, can be very frustrating for a kid who doesn't want to fucking deal with that at all.
Plus, it's incredibly complex.
Super complex.
Like, even it is the most complicated tabletop game I've ever played. Which I've played a lot of board games and stuff, and I'm sure there's somebody out there who'll be like, well, I've played this one game that was like, required an IQ of 360 or whatever.
You've clearly never played Axis and Allies.
but Warhammer Fantasy, you had this game that had all these really complicated systems, and it required a lot of different interesting skills. You had to understand probability very well. You had to be able to mentally measure things very well. Especially in the earlier
edition. Yeah, seriously.
6th and 7th, you were not allowed to put a ruler on the table unless you were like strictly like moving, but you weren't allowed to like measure the distance of a cannon or something. You had to guess, which was kind of ridiculous looking back on it. It was cool if you could do it right, but anyway, 8th edition, I mean, we're talking about a book that had 230 pages of rules with another 100 pages of lore and another 200 pages of community crap.
Right.
And, it'd be this $80 book that you'd have to buy just to get started.
Right.
And it was ridiculous.
They did a good job towards the end of saying, hey, here's the starter set, and the starter set comes with like a small booklet that is just strictly the rules. And the rules were streamlined a little bit more by that point in the 8th edition. But still, it wasn't, you couldn't just say, oh, okay, I'm going to look at this war scroll, I'm going to look at this 8th edition Warhammer 40,000 card, and know exactly what I have to do. It was so much more dense.
One of the best things about Age of Sigmar that it was a hard thing to accept at first, but now that I use it a lot, is that the accessibility to all the rules is so stupidly convenient.
Right.
Like the fact that, if I want to try buying a new unit or anything like that, or like just seeing how a faction plays, I can literally just go to Games Workshop's website, go to the model page, and right there is a PDF that says, here's the war scroll. And you click on, you get to read the rules.
Right.
So, and there's even a really, really Like Games Workshop has been getting really into apps lately, and there is a really nice app for like Age of Sigmar where you can find anything and everything. All the rules to the entire game is just right there, and it's super convenient. And you know, like there are, of course, they have, as Age of Sigmar is getting older, they've started to kind of gateway more and more rules into the actual battle tomes.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, you got the rules for all the units, but you know, maybe you don't have their faction specific items. You know, for that you need the battle tome. But even the battle tomes are incredibly cheap on average compared to the old army books.
And the battle tomes are really geared towards people that really want that lore. They miss the lore from the fluff from the
but like,
army books of old.
And it's a game that can get complicated, but its barrier of entry, is just ridiculously low. We are incredibly off topic.
That happens when you and I get rolling, my brother. But we're gonna bring it around. We're gonna bring it around right here because we're talking about Age of Sigmar. We're talking about fantasy. So let's bring it around to more fantasy.
Right. So since this is releasing on Saturday, we are allowed to talk about the Queen the Crone DLC. So we've actually got a good amount of time to get into this. But before we get into it too much, I do want to kind of put out a little bit of a PSA for anyone watching this.
Public service
is like me. That's like me and really enjoys single-player campaigns in Total War, but hated Mortal Empires.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I used to hate Mortal Empires was A, it had a lot of really game-breaking bugs.
Right.
And B, the victory conditions for Mortal Empires were horribly idiotic.
Oh.
You know, where you had to own every single capital. You had to own 17 capitals in the game for different races. So you had to own the entire planet, essentially. And yeah, you could do it through military alliance or what have you. But to get all 17 of them would not only take forever, but it was so difficult because it meant that you would either have to fight every single AI faction or force them into a military alliance and somehow stabilize those alliances. When the AI is programmed that if it doesn't have anybody to fight, it's slowly going to turn against you. Because the system's designed to think that's a good thing. You know, it's like, oh, the player's not fighting anybody and, you know, we have nobody to fight, so I should start turning against them to make the game interesting. When in reality, you're sitting there like, oh, no, just let me have Karazakarak dwarves. Don't attack me. Just you know.
let me swelter in all this gold alone.
One thing I noticed while, because looking at our early access, was that some of the Mortal Empire campaigns have been redone and have completely new objectives to finish the game that are not only achievable, but are very lore-friendly and are, quite frankly, just very fun.
Right.
And I thought I would go ahead and share those ones here with you, which they're basically the new ones.
From within Lore Master of Sotek's journal.
Yeah. So currently, I would say the playable races. Plus, they fixed a ton of bugs. They fixed a ton of bugs. Mortal Empires is actually very enjoyable to play now. But the Ungrim Iron Fist, Wulfric the Wanderer, Throg, Helibron, Elithanar, and Ilario the Everqueen. Those 6 campaigns currently are the best campaigns in the game, because they have fascinating objectives that are actually legitimately fun to accomplish. For instance, if you play Norska, for the long campaign victory, so like to get the ultimate victory, you no longer have to capture all 17 settlements.
Oh my God, really?
All around the world and, you know, all this stuff. Instead, what you have to do is it's very simple. It's like you reach level 3 with the god, makes sense. You beat the other champions and you finish the final quest battle, makes sense. You have to own 8 of the 17, which is much more reasonable. Much
more doable, yeah.
Plus, that's not actually an objective for like Helibron, Ungrim, or Ilario. That's just for Throg and Wulfric. But for them, it makes sense because they can only take those settlements.
Right.
Like you want those settlements for your tech tree, and you want those settlements because they're the only settlements you can take. If you're intending to invade, Ulthuan, then you should probably stop by Crone and take it just so you have, a sizable fortress where you can recruit new armies. And that's not just, a crappy little outpost.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, one of the biggest things that I've noticed in this DLC and playing around with it is that, like, it's like you said, everything is just more fun. I mean,
Everything's just better.
Yeah.
Plays better. It looks better. It feels better.
Yeah, the game is way more optimized. Like from like an actual like performance on your machine part. Like it's way easier to play with. It just works well with your machine. It doesn't get bogged down as much. Like that was one thing when I'm coming from Total War Warhammer 1 into 2, that was immediately like irked me. I'm like, why? I'm playing the same game.
Oh, it was terrible.
And like it's the same engine,
but worse.
Yeah, and you like I'm struggling to get 60 frames a second, but if I boot up Warhammer 1, like I'm screaming at 100. So
and the AI is like trying to dodge siege weapons, and you'd confederate with a faction, but their lord was wounded, so he'd be dead permanently. Like those are all fixed. All those bugs are fixed. AI doesn't try to dodge anymore. Black powder weapons no longer have line of sight arc problems. If you confederate with it, like there is a mod that just came out 2 or 3 days ago on Reddit about a guy who created a kind of an interesting solution to the lords being killed when you confederate. And I feel bad for him that he put in all that work just for it to get fixed. Just like I feel bad for the guys who made the dwarf rune forging system just for it to get implemented.
Hey man,
which by the way is a fantastic system.
And furthermore, we don't know. That could have been the impetus. Maybe they were like, "Fuck, these guys nailed it."
I hope not. Just feel bad for them.
They're like, "Damn."
But, to go back to the prior point, so with Wulfric, you get those 8 capitals, and for him, you have to kill the Empire, Bretonnia, and Wintertooth.
Right.
Or confederate with it. You have to eliminate Wintertooth, whether by confederation or killing him. But that's it. And then I think you have to get like 10,000 income through raiding, and then you have to own like 7 units from a mix of like skin wolves, mammoths, stuff. But it's all very thematic. Whereas like Ungrim's objectives, because if you go back right now and you go start up a Tyrion campaign or a Krokar campaign or any of those, all of them have the same stupid objective of go claim these 17 capitals and make sure Archaon is dead, which is it's lame, Whereas so I just told you about Wulfric. Now compare this to Ungrim. Ungrim's objective is that he has to own specific mountain ranges within the old world. He basically needs to own like all the World's Edge mountains and a couple in the Giant Home Mountains up in Norska and a couple of little spots. But it's all like located to the old world. In addition, he has to wipe out Clan Moulder, Wintertooth, Norska, and who else is up there? Crooked Moon. Crooked Moon. Those are the 4 factions he has to wipe out. He doesn't even have to kill the main Greenskin faction to get his ultimate victory. He just has to kill the Crooked Moon tribe. So he kills those 4 factions. Then he has to own those specific mountains. Then he has to have at least 7 Slayer units between all his armies, which is kind of goofy. And then he has to have an empty Book of Grudges. And he has to have at least...
That's challenging as hell in and of itself, though. Let's be honest.
It can be, yes, it can be. But they got rid of the grudge. So the grudge where the AI would like hit you with a hero, that grudge is completely gone.
Okay.
No, they struck it from the game because it sucked, and it's all the grudges are so much easier to deal with now. So if you get if your research gets stolen or a character gets assassinated, you no longer have to assassinate an enemy character. That grudge is completely gone.
Because that was just too much. That was too
much.
Plus,
the grudge system is awesome now because instead of giving you just random stuff, it gives you oath gold, which you use to forge runes, which is a very cool system. But since we're starting to get a little scant on time, I wanted to go ahead and switch into Italian, other eye. What are your? It only popped into my head because you mentioned something about him earlier. That's the only reason I'm blaming you.
It's because we were playing a great game called what the hell is it called? Space Hulk Enhanced Edition. All right, it's a fantastic time. But please, your question now, sir.
So my question is, overall, what are your thoughts on the DLC and the free DLC?
Okay, so I actually couldn't be more happy with it, honestly. Like, the Regiments Renowned are awesome. They're so spot on to what we get with like the uniforms and heraldry. They're awesome from a lore perspective. And honestly, a lot of people are saying like, oh, why am I going to want to watch Ilariel's campaign? Now, I know you have played her campaign. I know you've been listening to me play her campaign. Now, I have not played Ilithanar. Admittedly, I'm waiting to play that because we're actually recording this on a Wednesday. Oh, I'm going to be playing it on Friday. Now, what do you think of the aggression level? I guess just the aggression level of Ilariel compared to Ilithanar, because I think Ilariel is has to be way more aggressive than Ilithanar.
I completely agree. Well, Ilariel is aggressive in a defensive way, though.
Right.
Ilariel is aggressive in that she has a bubble that she has to keep safe, and you have to do whatever it takes to keep that bubble safe. Ilithanar is much more, you have targets you have to assassinate, but you can accomplish it by any means. Now, they are timed, so you do have to be fast and kind of aggressive, but you can go at your own pace, and it's not a big deal, and you don't take huge penalties. Whereas Ilariel, if you're not constantly on the up and up, and you're not doing a good job accomplishing her objectives, you're going to be in huge trouble.
Seriously, I feel like people are totally underestimating Ilariel's campaign, and honestly, I think of the three, it's gonna keep you on edge the most because, okay, so you've got Scaling invading from the northeast. You start with Dark Elves on the continent, on both the north and the south. Eventually, Clark Heron will come over from the west. You've got what's it called? Not the Mongols or the Mongs, whatever they're called. It's the horse.
Oh, the Hung. The Hung.
The horse one.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're coming in from the north, and they get fat fast, and you have to,
especially since they have actual Norscan units now.
Yeah,
they're no longer like the discount Norska.
Exactly. You're not just getting generic crap ass marauders here. So you have to deal with all that, and if Sartosa doesn't get knocked out, which is now an actual, not a faction. Well, it is a faction, but it's got its own actual territory to capture. But
in Mortal Empires, yes, they moved it. They've added it to Mortal Empires as well, which is super awesome.
Okay, but if you don't actually deal with that, you're going to be up a creek, because basically what's going to happen is you're going to be beset on all sides, and on top of it, you got Hellebron's blood voyages that'll come into your realm randomly. So Ilariel is more aggressive but defensive, whereas Ilithanar is going to be way more aggressive on like a subterfuge kind of. He gets basically like, not webway, what's it called?
The Shadow Realm stance.
Yeah, Shadow Realm stance, which is basically the underway, so he can jump across everywhere. So each one of these characters has this super awesome, dynamic, different campaign that is not just simply Teclis's campaign reskinned or Tyrion's campaign reskinned. Because that's what I was always wondering, like, how the hell are they going to do Ilariel and not make her basically just like a boring version of Teclis? That's all I always looked at her as in the lore. She's boring in the lore.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually want to play this now.
Yeah, I can only think of one book where she was, I can think of two books she was okay in, but one book where she was great. But the rest, if she even shows up,
Yeah, absolutely.
And going off that, like the other new campaigns, of course, the Norse campaigns are fantastic. We've talked to a lot of other people, and I've tinkered with them a little bit. They're super fun, and there's so much to do in Mortal Empires. You can go anywhere you want, and it's crazy. And the new monster hunts are stupid hard. They are stupid hard. I wish the best of luck to anyone that's going to attempt them. Hellebron, if you want the ultimate aggressive campaign, Hellebron is who you're going to play. Her campaign is where Ilariel has to be very aggressive about defending a certain space and being very proactive about protecting Ulthuan. Hellebron, you need copious amounts of slaves to have even a hope of your empire not falling apart, because you have to activate Death Knight so much, and at least on the higher difficulties, and that you have to be mean, brutal, and fast moving. But it's very fun, and I can tell you, especially if you caught the tournament that Turin and Italian hosted last Saturday, Hellebron's pretty scary.
Oh man, she's just a buzzsaw.
She's like, don't get me wrong, if you can catch her out with someone that can hit her or you shoot her with something, she'll go down in a heartbeat. But oh boy, does she hit like a truck. And of course, Ungrim's campaign, which I started a playthrough earlier this week, and I've almost finished it, the long version on Mortal Empires. I think I'm on turn 160. It is not only incredibly fun, but it's, in my opinion, it is easily the most difficult dwarf campaign. It is incredibly difficult.
This is Ungrim's, you're saying?
Ungrim, yeah. The Karak Kadrin campaign. Very, very difficult. Because the vampire counts are relentless, and so are the greenskins. And currently in the build, both of them are very powerful races, and they will just keep coming at you, and your expansion has to be slow, because you can't be everywhere at once. And the vampire counts you have to remember, they can reach from Eastern Sylvania to sieging your capital in a single turn, which will destroy your economy, because suddenly your capital is under siege, so you can't get any trade to it. And so you have to be very meticulous with Ungrim, and it is a slog. But if you really enjoy playing and fighting with dwarves, especially now that the AI doesn't act all funky around war machines and gunpowder weapons no longer are broken, it is a crazy fun campaign. Of course, the rune forging system is fun too. But other than that, I think that's pretty much everything we had on our docket for this podcast. We're doing pretty good on time. So do you have any closing things? Italian, any ideas about closing topic? Or do you think we're good?
Fine. Yes, I guess I can talk more about this awesome DLC.
Wait, hold on. I got something.
Oh.
Forget the DLC. I've got an idea. You asked me about a random high elf thing. I'm going to ask you about a random high elf thing.
Shit, I don't know anything about high elves, but go ahead.
Okay, so my question, so you asked me about a random character, so I'm going to pick something totally different. What is your favorite invasion of Ulthuan?
That's a good one. I like Inkari's invasion a lot. Grand the Paunches bores me. I don't like greenskins. Greenskins.
You gotta pick one. You gotta pick one.
I'm thinking out loud here.
Go down the list. Pick one.
we got like 7 minutes. We're trying to make these podcasts set about an hour long. So
that's true. Yeah, we are doing great on time. I'm very pleased.
And knowing how you and I can just go off and rant about things like we did earlier. Thanks for bringing us back.
That's why we have stopwatches running.
I know, seriously. Let me think. I you know what? I'll go with the invasion that ultimately leads to the Battle of Finneval Plains. That's probably
the classic Malekith invasion.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite ones because it's like definitely like it's definitely like the meme all according to plan Malekith situation where like all of his pieces kind of fall in order and he just kind of gets he gets surprised by something that he just didn't expect. He didn't expect the Tyrion and Teclis, the Wonder Twin powers to activate.
That was the twins' big debut.
Right. Like the only other time that they were noted.
That was when they really became super famous. Yep. That was their biggest battle.
Well, because before that,
at least until
before that,
later on.
Inkari like breaks out of the vortex and starts destroying waystones, and then they have a big square off at the Shrine of Assyrian, in which Tyrion goes into the Shrine of Assyrian and is like basically met, or no, that's Teclis who goes in and basically met with like the overwhelming presence of the god that is the omniscient god of that is Assyrian. So that was a really cool invasion too, but a little bit different because really encapsulated only within Ulthuan, only really comprised of like not as many dark elves. Like I like Finneval Plains because it brought dark elves, it brought Norskins, and it brought high elves all together to fight against Malekith.
My personal favorite
I don't care about that. No thanks. Guys, it looks like we're out of time here today.
My personal favorite is the Skaven invasion of Ulthuan, which have always gone horribly.
The Isle of Blood?
Not the Isle of Blood. There was an event. It featured Caradryan, like his big showcase when he first came out in 7th edition was revolved around the Skaven invasion. They retooled it a little bit for 8th edition, but it's still essentially the same story. So the Skaven, of course, as you know, if you've played Total War Warhammer and played through the Skaven intro, don't have a presence on Ulthuan. It's the only place they can't get to.
For it floats above.
It's a floating isle, so they can't dig to it. So they have tried numerous times to make fleets and to attack Ulthuan directly. Most of the time, this fails utterly because the magical wards that protect Ulthuan are just befuddle the Skaven and cause them to just get lost, or they get attacked by dragon ships or merworms and just torn apart or what have you. However, there was, in recent years of the timeline, there was a successful Skaven invasion that made it to Ulthuan shores. Unfortunately for them, not only were the High Elves there waiting for them, the Skaven did put up a great fight. They even unleashed a Hell Pit Abomination and like all sorts of terrible weapons, and they were defeating the High Elves. And unfortunately for them, Caradryan was at the Shrine of Assurin and could see the battle. So he not only decided to go join the battle, but every single Phoenix that lived at the Shrine of Assurin, which is all of them, by the way, also went to join the battle. And the Skaven got absolutely destroyed.
And he has a pretty close bond with Phoenix. Like, I mean, like, Phoenix is like, he helps like one Phoenix during like the Battle of Finneball Plains, because like for some reason Ashtari, like that's the name of the Phoenix, decides to go up against a black dragon and then just like starts getting worked over. In which case, Caradryan or Caradryan, whatever, decides to come in and help him out. So it's like the Phoenix is like, all right, not only are we kind of housed around the Shrine of Assyrian anyway, you got to pass. You're on the list. Cool guy here. I like you a lot, Caradryan.
Yeah, but I love that battle. And not a single Skaven got away. That was the crazy part. The High Elves managed to kill every single one. It was amazing.
Skaven are like Greenskin. You leave one alive, they just spread through fungi, basically, just inhabiting cheese mills.
Yep.
Ugh.
I think that actually is going to wrap us up for today.
Yeah, I think
if you've got any closing words about the DLC or what have you, I think now's a good time, and then you're all set.
No, you took my glory moment already. You took it from me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't worry about it. But that does wrap us up here today, guys. Thanks for stopping in and joining us on our first Casthammer, number 1 of the series here. Again, we'll be having these up weekly or bi-weekly. We'll be discussing what we've been discussing here today. Games Workshop's IPs and in their entirety. So if you haven't, head on over to Loremaster of Sotek's channel. And if you're on Loremaster of Sotek's channel, head on over to my channel if you want. But you can look forward to many more of these. But thanks for watching here today, guys. Be excited because the DLC is just around the corner. I think this is the 26th, and this is going to be coming up here. So about 5 more days for y'all. But we'll have plenty of early access content for you guys to devour in the meantime.
Yep. Thanks for watching.
All right, guys. Bye.